You're listening to the Forever West Old Time Radio Hour every Thursday here at the station. I like to imagine everybody sitting down on their front porch of an evening, getting their favorite mug of coffee or tea and switching on the radio. Some old 1930s wooden tube powered monstrosity and listen to some good old Western radio.
I bet Western radio was a big deal back in its day.
Oh yeah. I just woke up from a nap like literally 10 minutes ago.
Right.
And
He needs to
I don't even know what year it
compose
is.
himself.
I don't even know if I got everything in order. I don't know if we're live.
We're live. We're definitely live. It says it right there at the top.
There we go.
There we go. We're live.
Well, how you doing, Doss?
I'm doing good, man. I didn't even mention it because there was no need to, because my voice started coming back. But like a couple days ago, yeah, my voice was almost gone. I just had like a sore throat, heavy cough, but no nausea. I could eat. I was sleeping okay, but the cough, it was like a real dry cough. Like something was always like itching in my throat in a way, and then I just couldn't stop coughing, right? And then I think it just got my throat like inflamed and stuff from all the heavy coughing.
Well, it just gives it a better texture for radio.
Yeah, I kind of agree.
Hey, we're revisiting some familiar territory tonight.
We are, and I'm excited as always. This is always good stuff, and we were just saying this is our bread and butter and kind of going back to the roots. I would like to thank everyone who voted for the poll for tonight's episode on YouTube. We threw it up there because with the kid, there is just so much. 3-4 years ago, I believed a little bit more about the whole, we don't really know that much about him. My friend, we know a lot. I think it's, and I would agree with this statement before I even say it. I think what's missing is just the certain things that people don't feel there are answers to. Whether that means because they don't believe the evidence or, let's face it, they don't want to. Right? They don't want to believe that Billy was killed. And I understand. It's just one of those things. I've had moments where the research really brings me close, I think, in certain parallels to him and what he was going through and stuff. And so I understand. It sucks. But today we are going to go down that path. And I know it's a constant debate on all sides. He didn't die. He did die. There's proof. That's not real proof. Well, it is proof. And it's called court of law proof. And I guarantee it's the kind of proof that holds up in a court of law today. Okay. So we are going to examine that. We're going to go deep down. I would like to assume and think that everyone out there has heard Garrett's version from his book directly. And I don't mean twisted, manipulated versions of Garrett's account. I mean directly from the book, whether you say you believe it or not. That is the man who hunted him, captured him, and killed him. Okay? And the book is far more detailed than I think a lot of people want to give it credit for. Granted, we know Ash Upson's contributions need to be looked at very, with it. Just stay back from it a little bit. Don't go diving deep into it unless you want to like prove some of it to be right or wrong, which I've done. A lot of people have done. And most of it is, just kind of fanciful stuff, right? But I've always been able to tell when Garrett takes over. At least I have been able to, it's a very different writing style. It's like basically, Garrett's just kind of telling him, here's what we did, here's where we rode, here's how many miles, and then of course ups and adds his flair, right? Adds his melodrama, right?
Mhm.
So I don't want to go, too far. Like I figure everyone can have the accounts again, put in their head, so they're there, and we can examine if there are any differences. And this stuff's all been done before, but it's always fun to do it again. And for those who have always been on the fence, the goal is hopefully by the end of this, there will be that we've convinced you that this is real evidence. There's quite a bit of it out there. Some of it's got some interesting twists and turns on its own. We've got some documentation that goes missing, and we have to deal with that. That causes alternative narratives. That happens all the time, and we just keep fighting through, and we keep debunking and fighting them away like mosquitoes. Like, get out of here. We've already dealt with that. But we know, as you know, usually very shortly they pop right back up, right? And that's just the way it is.
Mhm.
So let's go. Let's get cracking. I know I've sent you a lot of stuff. So I am going to start. Let's start with that night. So anybody who's live and everybody's ready, let's go ahead, and I'm going to read Garrett's account. Okay. And it does start from a certain standpoint, and we'll go through it, kind of mess with that night a little bit, and then everything that happens afterwards, and it'll
And
just kind of unfold.
we will walk with our friend Bob Bose Bell through the scene as you read
Yeah.
using his artwork.
Absolutely. Yes. Those sketches are fantastic. I've always
Yes.
felt like, they're perfect for this scenario. It's almost like he
Yes.
read that and imaged it, and it's great. Okay. Garrett's account of that moment reads as follows. It was near midnight and Pete was in bed. I walked to the head of the bed and sat down on it beside him near the pillow. I asked him as to the whereabouts of the kid. He said that the kid had certainly been about, but he did not know whether he had left or not. At that moment, a man sprang quickly into the door, looking back, and called twice in Spanish, "Who comes there?" No one replied, and he came on in. He was bareheaded. From his step, I could perceive he was either barefooted or in his stocking feet, and held a revolver in his right hand and a butcher knife in his left. He came directly towards me. Before he reached the bed, I whispered, "Who is it, Pete?" but received no reply for a moment. It struck me that it might be Pete's brother-in-law, Manuel Abreu, who had seen Poe and McKinney and wanted to know their business. The intruder came close to me, leaned both hands on the bed, his right hand almost touching my knee, and asked in a low tone, "Who are they, Pete?" So for clarification, anybody who's ever been curious, they've noticed that Garrett just gets placed in the room by people however they want to place him in the room, right? You hear these different tales, and we know how it goes. No, he didn't do that. He hid under the bed, and he hid under a couch, and he shot him in the back of the head with a shotgun. I've heard so many things. But if you think about what Garrett just the description right there. So for clarification, when Billy is entering the room, he was backing in and pointing his revolver at Poe and McKinney. And we're going to read Poe's account next. Okay. But I want that to be a little more clear. You and I have dealt with that. And at first I've had my own doubts, but you read it a little more carefully and you understand it's a sequence. Everything is moving. It's all happening quickly. Poe is even going to say that the whole thing was over in less than 30 seconds. Right. So we have that going, right? Okay. So when he's asking who they are, he means Poe and McKinney. At this point, I've never really felt that Billy knew if Garrett was in the room or not. And even Garrett would later say in the epilogue part of the book that I don't know if he saw me. I really don't. But if he did, he didn't fire for whatever reason, you know. Okay, so we got that clear where he's sitting on the bed. Okay. Garrett continued. At that same moment, Maxwell whispered to me, "That's him." Simultaneously, the kid must have seen or felt the presence of a third person at the head of the bed. He raised quickly his pistol, a self-cocker, within a foot of my breast. Retreating rapidly across the room, he cried, "Quien es? Quien es?" Quickly as possible, I drew my revolver and fired, threw my body aside and fired again. The second shot was useless. The kid fell dead. So if the kid is near the head of the bed, then retreated rapidly across the room at either the idea, the sense that a third person was in that room. Because now he's in the room, he no longer sees Poe and McKinney. Okay. And we hear Poe's account, it's great because Poe is going to give us the other part of that as he backs into the room. Okay. And so there it is. Very quick. They didn't want to go through why Garrett was in Fort Sumner or, anything else like that, or just from that point. Okay. So I've always thought about this too. Foot ahead of the bed. He's backing in. That means the way the room was set up, because I've seen the interior design of the room, there's like a sketch that has floated around quite a bit. I don't know if you've ever seen that, James, but it shows where his bed was and stuff,
Yeah.
So when Billy's backing in, if you can picture this, he's backing in, Poe and McKinney are on the porch. So when he backs in, that means Pete and Garrett are immediately to his left.
Yes.
Yes, right. Okay. I want to make sure that I have that correct too. So the bed is right up near against the wall in the corner. He's going to back in. He's asking, who are they? Right.
Yeah.
And then he gets closer to the bed just to whisper, I do wonder, as always, I don't want to spend too much time about it, but what was Billy doing there? I've always wondered. It doesn't mean that it changes anything. Why was he specifically going to Pete's room? Was it really about the beef?
Right.
You know what I mean? Is the beef story something we can really truly hold on to? It does state it in Garrett's book. It does state it in the in the accounts in the newspaper articles within the 3 days to a week after, and then it starts hitting worldwide. I can't remember if the whole beef angle was in that early of a source. And sorry, but they are sources. Yes, they can be ridiculous and filled with sensationalism sometimes, but a
Yeah.
lot of times they're just reporting events of what happened and what the information they've been given. But if the beef story existed within a few weeks of his death and that close to his death of a source, then I'd be like, man, it's something to really consider. But I think the beef angle came out many years later, I feel.
Hmm.
I don't know if that's really true. I've always wondered, because we don't know, and it's just a little speculation time, but I always kind of wondered if Billy did have a little bit, obviously, advantage in Fort Sumner, because we know Garrett did. It's not just him being sheriff of Lincoln County and a deputy U.S. Marshal with a badge and a couple of deputies. It was Pat Garrett. He was well known in Fort Sumner.
Yeah.
He lived there the entire time of the Lincoln County War, right? Garrett was not a part of Lincoln County War, was nowhere near around for any of that at all. Everyone should know that. But yeah, he was in Fort Sumner in 1878, the whole time, Lincoln County War. He knows people. He married his first wife, right? So I've always wondered if Billy may have gotten word that Garrett was there. Maybe. Or just the unfamiliarity of John W. Poe as well. But Garrett being 6'6", I don't care if it was midnight, 12:30, 2 in the morning. If there's people out walking around or on their horses or drinking, whatever. I mean, how do you not see Garrett?
Hmm.
How do you not know he's there or he's riding in town? I don't know. Speculation time, but I just was curious. It kind of clicked in my head, and I've always really been so curious to what made Billy walk, the distance, whether it was a short distance or not, which I don't think it was very long, but it just has always made me wonder if it was really the beef angle or if it was to ask Pete, something else, I don't know. I've always wondered.
Well, Iowa Joe says if Billy had a self-cocker pistol drawn, here's someone pull a gun and cock the hammer. Why didn't Billy fire?
Yeah. I personally, just me and what we can go off of, I just don't think he saw him. And
Yeah.
I understand Garrett's 6'6" and he's sitting on that bed. And how do you not see him? Well, because it's 1881 and the only light is really by the moon. But what's the moon gonna do when it hits the doorway, when it hits the porch, when it hits the window? It's gonna cause shadows everywhere.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And Garrett even says, for the most part, he was in the shadow. He was in the dark. I don't know, but that's something that everyone who loves the story of Billy the Kid wants to know. Why didn't he fire?
Well,
Who
yeah,
knows?
and I think as much as he was portrayed as a trigger-happy desperado, he certainly would
Sure.
not want to shoot someone without a cause, that was perhaps family, friends.
Yeah, I agree.
What if it was Luz Maxwell, or what if it was Paulita in
Yeah,
the night,
very true.
So he just had no idea. So he notices this movement, jumps back, he takes precaution, he
Right.
thinks, put some space between them, point the pistol in that direction, but don't fire yet until you know it's a threat.
Sure. Yeah, true. I mean, in every situation during the Lincoln County War, if he pulled his rifle, pulled his gun, I mean, he was using it. It was the proper scenario. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, he doesn't seem to have ever have a history of being very violently sporadic. You know what I mean? Like he's just not gonna just fire somebody because maybe they looked at him wrong or something. Yeah, so I think he was a little bit more in control of that. Um, so that's a good point. And I mean, I guess the simplest route to A and B is usually the simplest route to A and B. I just figure he can't see him.
Yeah.
That'll be my biggest bet. Or was he sitting in a way that Pete could have been harmed if he had fired?
Well, that
Was
too.
Garrett
Yeah.
sitting in a way that Pete could have been harmed, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I know Pete later said that I could have been shot 3 times that night.
Yeah, no, you're kidding. Yeah, and I don't know if anyone knows that story, but another good little detail. I don't have that written in here, but I just know it by heart. Um, but I think this is well attested to. I think it's legit. So Pete fled the room right afterwards and ran out of the porch and was hollering, "Don't shoot me! Don't shoot me!" And so apparently for quite a few years after that night of the kid's death, Pete was referred to in Fort Sumner as Don Shoot Me, right?
Yeah.
Don Shoot Me, Don Shoot Me. Little funny little story. Okay. All right. We're going to move on. All right. So now Garrett, okay, the kid is dead. He's laying on the floor. Now he's at near the back of the foot of the bed, right? Lying on the floor where he's been shot. Now, I would also think that if the door was open, Billy came in. Once the crowd starts to gather around Maxwell's, I think that was the easiest way. I mean, I think you could have just looked right into the room and been able to see him because of where he was laying. I'm
Mhm.
not saying someone may or may not had entered the room. We'll get to all that probably in part two, but it makes me wonder for all of those that were gathering if they could have just viewed right in and seen him laying in there. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know.
Okay. All right. So the following is John W. Poe's account of what happened after Garrett entered the house. Okay. So this is John W. Poe from his book, The Death of Billy the Kid. It should be mentioned here that up to this moment, I had never seen Billy the Kid nor Maxwell, which fact, in view of the events transpiring immediately afterward, placed me at an extreme disadvantage. It was probably no more than 30 seconds after Garrett entered Maxwell's room when my attention was attracted from where I sat in the little gateway to a man approaching me on the inside of and along the fence, some 40 or 50 steps away. I observed he was only partially dressed and was both bareheaded and barefooted, or rather had only socks on his feet. And it seemed to me that he was fastening his trousers as he came toward me at a very brisk walk. As Maxwell's was the one place in Fort Sumner that I had considered above suspicion of harboring the kid, I was entirely off my guard. The thought coming into my mind that the man approaching me was Maxwell or some guest of his who might have been staying there. He came on until he was almost in arm's length of where I sat before he saw me. And I'm going to guess that's because of the fence and the fence post. Okay. As I was partially concealed from his view by the post of the gate.
There you
I
go.
said that because it's like Poe says why he couldn't see him and why the kid couldn't see him, because everyone goes, well, why didn't he, well, he couldn't see him. I think that was the whole point. Okay. So upon seeing me, he covered me with his 6-shooter as quick as lightning, sprang onto the porch, calling out in Spanish, "Quienes, quienes," at the same time backing away from me towards the door which Garrett only a few seconds before had passed through, repeating his query, "Who is it?" in Spanish several times. At this, I stood up and advanced toward him, telling him not to be alarmed, that he should not be hurt, and still without the least suspicion that this was the very man we were looking for. As I moved toward him, trying to reassure him, he backed up into the doorway of Maxwell's room, where he halted for a moment, his body concealed by the thick adobe wall. At the side of the doorway, from whence he put out his head and asked in Spanish for the 4th or 5th time who I was. I was within a few feet of him when he disappeared into the room. After this, and until after the shooting, I was unable to see what took place on account of the darkness of the room, but plainly heard what was said on the inside. An instant after the man left the door, I heard a voice inquire in a sharp tone, "Pete, who are those fellows on the outside?" An instant later, a shot was fired in the room, followed immediately by what everyone within hearing distance thought were 2 other shots. However, there were only 2 shots fired. The third report, as we learned afterward, being caused by the rebound of the second bullet. Okay, let's talk about that, because to me, for obvious reasons, Poe's details are far more exquisite than Garrett's, right? I think we can agree.
Oh, yeah.
There is everything about the post 40 or 50 yards or 40 or 50 steps away, but Poe was actually sitting down the whole time, right? That's another thing that never probably gets recognized as a major detail in that, is that he's sitting. So he can see along that fence line, but as he's, as kids approaching him, the darkness, the fence post, he's sitting literally on the other side of the fence post. So Billy does not literally see him until he's pretty much right on top of him, right? Like, boom, they're going to almost run into each other. Oh, there you are. Like, oh, I didn't see you. And of course, that's what I would expect for all the talk about he didn't have a gun. He didn't have a gun. What do you mean? In the darkness, going in that room, and then you run. I mean, that's exactly why he had a gun. That's exactly why the kid carried. Sorry, my mic muted. So that's exactly why he carried a gun. I mean, there's lots of evidence for the gun as well too, but just saying, you know what I mean? That makes so much more sense. And we've also heard this a lot, and I understand. I've dealt with it myself, trying to examine it. Is the whole part about Poe saying that it appeared to me that he was fastening his trousers as he came toward me at a very brisk walk. What did we know that this ended up? It caused this scenario where everyone was trying to fasten their trousers while holding a pistol in their hand,
Right.
right? Going, that can't be done. He can't do it. Well, first thing I've always tried to look at, well, this gentleman was there. Okay. He was there. I look at it a little bit more closely. He has all the descriptions of the darkness, the fence post blocking it. It seemed to me that he was fastening his trousers. It seemed to me he could have been messing with his revolver in the front of his trousers.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that you can just go ahead and go, hey, here's where we can kind of speculate and ask some questions, probe it up a little bit and go, what about this detail? What about that? What about this? No, it just automatically goes, no, that's not possible. You can't do that and simultaneously fasten your trousers. And I'm aware you can't.
Well, I
So
think I think to me too, it's like little details like that really indicate to me that these guys are telling the truth
yeah,
because if you're manufacturing a story, you're going to want to make it as reasonable as possible, and you're not going to include details that don't make sense. Details like this seem to scream, "This is just what I saw." That's
right.
what it seems to say to me. Like he's outside, he's not wearing boots, which is weird. He
You're
looks
right.
like he's fastening his trousers. They
Hmm.
would not, I mean, any objection that we have to any of these details, I feel that they were much more intelligent about the context and the details than we are. So they would know, hey, if it's weird to not have your boots on outside, then people would question that. So if I'm manufacturing a story,
Sure.
I would not include that detail because that's weird, right? But
Yeah.
no, they include these weird details because that's just what happened. And even though it is weird, or even though it is mysterious or
Right.
inexplicable, that's how it went down. And so
Sure.
he sees a guy coming along the fence line, looks like he's buttoning his trousers. I don't know why. He's in his stocking feet. Okay, that's just how it happened. So it's like
Yeah.
those aren't holes in the story that they forgot to lie better about to me. Those are
No.
indications that, hey, this really happened because even they thought it was weird.
Right. And we should mention, even though we haven't really mentioned him yet, we know I had planned on getting to this in the next um part because I want to get, a lot more done in this part. So there's also the fact that most of the people who are deep into kid research know this, that the other deputy, Thomas Kit McKinney, did not give an account of that night ever. Of course, that made more headway for the conspiracy theorist. Oh,
Well,
okay,
that didn't stop other people from giving an account on his behalf.
on his behalf. That's right. So anyone that has ever come across that and as well is and understands, like, okay, hey, that is kind of weird, right? How does the third deputy who was on that porch not give an account? Well, I'm going to go through this real quick. Okay, real quick. So he didn't really give an account as far as I'm concerned. Okay. What we have as far as the Kit McKinney goes is another man says that this is one scenario that he told him that this is how it happened. Okay.
Mhm.
Now, that man was Frederick W. Gray. Okay, I'll go through this real quick. He was an Englishman, immigrated to Canada in the 1880s, hunted for a few years in Calgary, and he became enthralled with the golden opportunities waiting here in America, right? He had that whole dream. Once again, he hunted. This time, he spent some time in Texas and New Mexico, and he ends up working at the Clink mines for a while. Okay. He published his biography in 1912. 1912. At the time, it was considered a very stark and realistic view of American culture and politics. Okay. But in his biography, Gray also decided to include his versions of gunfighters such as Ben Thompson, Luke Short, and of course, Billy the Kid. Okay. So yeah, he's got a whole section in there about Ben Thompson and Luke Short, where he adds some details that are rather ridiculous. Okay. So here come the details from Gray's section in his book where he talks about Billy. Okay. Gray's details about Billy include that he was a half-breed Indian and that the kid originated or at least brought to perfection the art of whirling a gun and shooting. I think that right there, the first time I read it, just made me just kind of scoff and went, okay, so I know what this guy's about. Okay. Two details that could not be more wrong if he tried. All right. Half-breed Indian originated or perfected the art of whirling a gun and shooting.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Just shortly after mentioning Billy, Gray stated, there once was a man at the mines named Kenny. He was a genuine gunfighter. Gray then provided a detailed description of Kip, which I must say, if you've seen Kip's photos, it's highly accurate. That's the one thing that I guess always kind of made me stop, is that he describes Kip to a T. Okay. I don't know if you've seen Kip's photos. There's a couple of them, the one with all his family and the one of him later in life. One has seen pictures of the typical Texas cowboy, tall, angly, all bones apparently, with heavy eyebrows and long drooping mustache. Well, add pale gray eyes, deeply set, dark reddish brown skin with little hair-like veins close to the surface, and a pronounced Roman nose, and you have Kip Kinney. Now, his name is McKinney, but Gray, the entire time, does not spell it with the Mick in the front of it. You know what I mean? There's no MC. He just spells it Kinney. Okay, that's another thing that I've always been bothered by. Okay, he doesn't do that right. But the description of Kip is pretty accurate. Okay. So Gray spent a few paragraphs discussing Kip's issues with a shift boss by the name of Bettner. McKinney's frustrations were deep as he expressed wanting to kill this guy named Bettner to Frederick Gray. The subject then swung back to Billy the Kid, Pat Garrett, and the night of July 14th, 1881, Gray said, finally, as I said before, Sheriff Pat Garrett, a product of Uvalde, and Kip Kinney went after him. They found a Mexican girl whom the kid used to visit and lay in wait for him there after tying and gagging her. Garrett stayed inside the house behind a sofa, and Kip was to stay outside and make sure Kid didn't get back to his horse after the shooting commenced. The kid rode up at nightfall and walked into the house. He entered the dark room when he drew his pistol and asked who was there. As he called out, Garrett rose from behind the sofa and, sighting the kid against the light in the doorway, fired twice, killing him instantly.
Right.
Does that sound familiar? You know what I mean? Some of these the internet rumors and conspiracies. This is one I've heard.
Yeah, I mean, there's another account attributed to McKinney as well.
Yeah, and it's like completely opposite.
Well, and it kind of sticks with the narrative, only at the end it says that McKinney went in and saw Pat lean down and check the body, and he said it was the only time he'd seen Pat Garrett cry. You know?
Yeah,
and so I mean,
for a second.
and that's the problem. I mean, we have 2 or 3 different accounts completely at odds with one another, all attributed to McKinney, and that's the problem with secondhand accounts.
Yeah.
And McKinney died fairly early on, didn't he?
Yeah, I don't know how long he lived. I'm not sure. I don't know if he lived to be a
So,
real old man or not.
I mean, the simple answer to why he never wrote an account was probably just because after Pat's failed account in 1882, nobody really talked much about it until
Yeah,
the hype started back up. And I think maybe McKinney missed out on that hype train.
that's possible. I have a very small theory that I can't really roll on out like a nice red carpet. It's just something very simple. There's that. That's a very good point. That is a very good point because we all know the book was initially a failure, right?
Yeah.
Um, but something that, again, a detail that you would only know if you read Garrett's book. What about the fact that when Billy was on the porch, right? When he encounters Poe and McKinney, do you remember what Garrett said in the book? What happened to Kip McKinney when he rose up? Because they were both sitting, right? Pat says this in the book. It's very clear. But but Poe doesn't mention this. And sometimes I wonder when I've read that, why would Garrett lie about this and Poe not
Right.
mention it at all? But Garrett says that Kip's spur caught the plank board on the porch and kind of slightly tripped him and kind of threw his body forward a little bit, and the kid laughed. The kid laughed at him, and it was apparently in that instant before, like, he drew his revolver, like, after laughing at him. But Poe doesn't mention that. That doesn't mean it didn't happen, and Garrett was inside the house. So
Yeah.
how did he know he tripped? I would say that Poe and McKinney, or Poe told him he tripped, or McKinney told him, "Shit, I tripped," and he was
Yeah.
embarrassed, like, just super embarrassed, and then to find out, like, that was the kid, and he walked right past us, you know?
It is
I've al
embarrassing.
It is
Like
embarrassing.
we let the kid walk right in on Pat.
Right, and then I tripped because my spur, caught a board on the porch, like, it's again, you're gonna, create a conspiratorial lie for the next 145 years, but you create details like that?
Yeah.
No, you know. Um, so anyway, but there is one more too, in regards to Kip. I don't know if you knew this one or not. Another one, it doesn't have much sway at all, but there is another one. Surfaced around 1933, and his name was Howell Johnson. He was an attorney for Pecos County, Texas. He told the El Paso Herald Post in 1933 that Kip told him that it wasn't Garrett who killed the kid, but Kip himself
Of course.
dispatched the outlaw. Right. The big load of shit. But something that I wrote here in my notes that I just like, and I put mention this part because I think this is very interesting. If Kip did tell this to Frederick W. Gray, if he actually did give him this story, right?
Mhm.
Kip still places himself outside the room just like he was on the actual night.
Yeah. What does he say? Do you have the particulars of what he told him when he said that he did it?
No, 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 because that article, literally, it's Howell Johnson, and he's like literally talking about this one thing, and
Yeah.
and he's just basically, I feel like, oh, I've got something to say to the paper, and he says that Kip told him this. Doesn't tell him when he told him, what year, a date, nothing, no other details. It's just that
Yeah.
no, Garrett. It's almost like saying that it happened the same way, except Kip killed him and not Garrett.
Right.
So there you have the other deputy. So anyone who has ever said, well, he said this. Well, we have two other people saying that he said these things and they're completely opposite. So I feel like, that's just one of those things. People are weird. They like to talk and, get involved. And this is crazy history, the most notorious outlaw in history. So I
Well,
get
and
it.
we need to remember too that you didn't have blogs and Facebook where you could just go out and publish your thoughts. Like, think of all these people. Pete Maxwell. never wrote his account, never published an account of what happened that night. He was in the room, but he did talk about it to people.
Yeah,
Right after the kid was shot, same year, I think the Las Vegas papers were like, Pete's up here telling everybody about what happened in his room and stuff like that. So it's not that these people didn't talk about it or tell their friends about it or anything like that, but how often did that get directly
true.
published in a
Yeah,
legit publication, firsthand account wise? More
yeah,
likely, it's just they got handed down and people embellished them as they went. You ended up with 4 different versions of
sure.
that person's story.
Yeah, no, yeah, good point. No, I know what you mean. I have a couple other detailed bullet points because I do everything in bullet points. So you remember that Texas Ranger, James B. Gillette,
Yes,
right?
the one that killed Jesse Evans, or you know, somehow involved in everything that happened.
Yes. Okay, James B. Gillette, Texas Ranger and
The
friend
best a
of
man
Pat
can get.
Garrett. What's that?
The
Best
best a
man.
man can
Oh,
get.
dude, that's funny. Didn't even think about that. Okay, Texas Ranger, friend of Pat Garrett. He employed Kit McKinney for many months at his Estado Land and Cattle Company. And on February 21st, 1923, James B. Gillette wrote a letter to E.A. Brennenstuhl in Marfa, Texas. This is available in the E.A. Brennenstuhl collection, box 3G469. And in this letter, James B. Gillette says that when Kit McKinney worked for him at the Estado Land and Cattle Company, McKinney told the same story as Garrett and Poe.
Yeah, interesting. And Brennan Stool is the same guy who published Poe's account.
Yes, he is.
Yeah. So
Absolutely.
he
So I
would be in
imagine that's
position to
probably
know.
where that came into play. Yeah. Another little tiny detail again that I think this is great. I think this is just man, like he showed up, right? A couple of them did. November 30th, 1950, Ollie P. Brushy Bill Roberts goes before New Mexico Governor Thomas Mabry in hopes of clearing his name as he claimed to be the outlaw known as Billy the Kid. This meeting took place in the governor's executive mansion with newspaper reporters, police, and historians present. Also present were Oscar Loman Garrett, his brother, Jarvis Powers Garrett, and Cliff McKinney,
Yeah.
son of Kip.
So I mean, I'm sure that Kip would have told Cliff many things,
Yeah,
Uh, I do think Cliff at one time wrote into a Western magazine or something in one of the letters to the editor thing. I'll have to find that source
that would
where
be
he may have
interesting.
mentioned something. Yeah, we'll have to look
Sure.
into Cliff.
Okay, so we got through that. So those are the accounts because those are the men who were there. Okay, so he's dead. We know what Poe has said from everything that happened from the outside of the room as he enters the room. Garrett gives us the rest of it. Now, what happens immediate after? Let's talk about that because I know this is always going to be fun. How about let's talk about Private George Miller.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Private George Miller. Some people know this, some people do not. Okay. George Miller was a black private in Company G, 9th Cavalry. He was en route from Fort Stanton to Santa Fe. And that was afterwards. That was afterwards. Okay. Hold on. Let me back up here. Yeah, my Google Docs did something weird to my notes. They're all still there, but they put them out of order a little bit. Okay. Okay. So the shots, they're going to awaken a lot of people. Sumner's not a big place at the time. Okay. And I know for a fact that some people do know this because they've done the homework and they've done the legwork. And some people are going to hear this for the first time. Okay. So what happened after the shots within just a few minutes, right? Story goes, and what we know and what we've researched is that many people, and there is George Miller, many people begin gathering outside Maxwell's house. Okay. Who were those people? Because a lot of people seem to believe that Pete was in this house by himself. Maybe at the best, at the most, they'll admit that, oh, Paulita was there. We know she was there, but that's the best you'll ever hear. I mean, no one ever says, well, what about everyone else? Right? The Maxwells had a big family and then a big house. There was a lot of people who actually lived there, right? Which to me throws off there's a lot of other evidence to completely debunk any of that stuff, but it also gets in my mind about that theory that Billy was already inside the house with Paulita. I feel like there was far too many Spanish women in that house for that to happen, right? Like it's just, I don't think it's possible. Okay, so who is there? Who is there? Let's go through them. Pete's mother, Luz Maxwell, his sisters, Paulita and Odelia, Delavina Maxwell, Pete's uncle, Pablo Bubian, and his wife, Rebecca, and Manuel Abreu. Those are all Maxwell's and Maxwell in-laws, right? They were quickly joined by many others, including Paco Anaya, Eugenio Garcia, Jesus Silva, Saval and Celso Gutierrez, Martin and Obrana Garcia, Lorenzo and Jose Jaramillo, Vicente Otero, Isaac Sandoval, Frank Labato, Marie Labato, and George Miller. George Miller, again, was a black private. Actually, no, he was a sergeant, Company G, 9th Cavalry. Okay. George Miller is staying 25 yards. He's staying the night in Fort Sumner. He is 25 yards. He says that himself in his account. 25 yards from the Maxwell's house. Okay. George Miller, like all these others, are outside the Maxwell house where Pete's room is. Clearly, from what George is going to say, that he was there. He saw the kid. He knows the story. People are, Garrett's there. What's interesting is that he's going to depart Sumner and get to Las Vegas on the 17th. Okay. He reports his account to a reporter at the Las Vegas Daily Optic. They print it the following day, July 18th, 1881, page 4, A Soldier's Story. And I believe you so masterfully found that article after we acknowledged that we actually hadn't seen the article. We had seen the actual, the whole summary of the account and everything else like that. And you found the actual article and it's all right there. Now, George Miller is also going to be the one person who is going to change something about what we've always known. Again, it's there, but you'd have to really dig to know. But
hey,
if you recall,
Doss, I found another cool photo of George. Have you only seen that one?
I believe you have one of him in his soldier's outfit, don't you?
Yes, check that out.
There it is. Where's he at?
Yeah, and this is him right here.
There
second, standing from left.
Yep. Yes, I remember when you found that.
Yeah, such a cool photo.
Absolutely. Okay, so what's the big thing that George, you remember, other than confirming what happened and, confirming both accounts of what we already know? He says he stopped at the hotel in Fort Sumner on July 14th, and at about
a big 3-story affair, a hotel in Fort Sumner.
Yeah. And about 12:30 a.m., his peaceful slumber was disturbed by 2 pistol shots fired in rapid succession. The sounds proceeded from the house of Pete Maxwell, distant about 25 yards, and soon the startling information, Billy the Kid is killed, was the theme on every tongue. The wild inquiry, who killed him, was soon answered by the facts which soon became known to all. Pat Garrett had done it with his trusty revolver, backed up by cool judgment and undaunted courage. It appears that Sheriff Pat Garrett had ascertained from a sheep herder that Billy was prowling around in the vicinity of Fort Sumner. And acting upon this intelligence, he concluded to visit that place and see if he could effect the arrest of the noted desperado. In company with two plucky men, Garrett rode into Sumner about midnight and ascertained that Billy was stopping at the house of a Mexican named Juan Chavez. I would like to point out the Las Cruces Sun News, July 23rd, 1881, Garrett's full account is in that article. He also says that Billy was stopping at the house of Juan Chavez. That close to the night him being killed, I feel like that has been overlooked because what happened over the next 145 years, 44, 40, however long it's been, it changed, right? He was at Celso Gutierrez's house. He was at this person's house.
Yeah.
I'm not saying he couldn't have gone to numerous houses. I'm just saying, why did the Juan Chavez thing get drowned out when it was that close to the death itself in newspaper accounts?
That's a good point. Yeah.
In Garrett's count, right? So very interesting.
That article is, and Pat did it's like an advertisement, and Pat did it with his trusty revolver, and
right?
A nice cold glass of Coca-Cola Classic,
right? And we do know too that we have to deal with that kind of exaggerant behavior from writers, especially then, especially now. But all the details are here, okay? And we've got it right here. Yeah, kid presence was presence was confirmed by
there, and he brings this news into Las Vegas when he comes, right?
Yeah, and he actually beats Garrett to Las Vegas. That's what's interesting. So Garrett's not the first one to give the account. George Miller is the first one to give the account, which I find even more interesting. And again, something you just don't know until those details are really, really scanned closely, Again, so that's one of those big things. So if anyone caught that, and if you did not know this, technically, Billy the Kid was killed July 15th, not July 14th.
That's correct. Yep.
Yeah. Small but massive detail.
It's George Miller says we just it's convenience for us to say the 14th.
Absolutely. I still do it all the time. I still say the 14th. Yeah. I mean, because I know not everyone is gonna regroup to change that, because why? You know what I mean? It's a small detail, but it's a big detail. And he says the two shots were at 12:30.
Mm-hmm.
So George Miller, Soldier's Story. So he's up there and he explains everything. Kid shot in the heart, standing rear part of the room. Fatal bullet from Garrett's revolver entered the kid's heart. Another shot was fired in quick order, but it missed its mark. The form of the desperado having fallen in the icy embrace of death. Oh, give me a break. On Friday morning, a coroner's inquest was held, and in the afternoon, his mortal remains were interred in the cemetery at Fort Sumner. 3 days after he was killed. Okay, 3 days.
A lot of people in their heads, in their head canon, their narratives, they just place it the next day. He was just buried the next day.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I know what you mean, because I do it all the time. When I first found out about the George Miller account, I had to just kind of go, do I really want to change it to the 15th? In my mind, like, oh, it's 12:30. Oh, man, that does make a difference. But I've just always still referred to as the 14th. It's just easier, I guess.
It was just one of those things where like the consensus is just so strongly on the 14th. I think anybody who really thinks about it would realize it was the 15th, but anytime you say that, there's going to be the subsequent conversation of, well, was it this? And you're going to have that timeline conversation every time, even when it's not pertinent to the topic. So everybody just kind of says the 14th out of convenience.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Billy's burial. Let's talk about Billy's burial. Now, for anyone who may not know this, I'm going to throw this out here. There is a man, one of the biggest major sources for the kid's death and burial is a man named Robert J. Stahl, along with Nancy Stahl and Marilyn Stahl Fisher. They have an unpublished manuscript, okay? Copyright December 2014, revised March 17th, 2020. Loaned to our pal and author, James Blake Mills, for his book, Billy the Kid, El Bandito Simpatico. And Robert J. Stahl is also, if I remember correctly, the man who petitioned the state of New Mexico to give Billy a death certificate. But of course, that did not happen. So Stahl has done quite the research over the years, and a lot of that is, a good portion of it is in El Bandito Simpatico by Mr. Mills. Okay. So the burial, we've got Jesus Silva and some of the Mexican women from Fort Sumner. They're going to ask permission to move Billy's body. They removed it to the carpenter shop on the eastern side of the fort, and he was placed on the workbench. Okay. They cleaned his body, stuffed the wound with a rag, and they placed candles around his body as in typical fashion as the start of like a wake, right? Later in the morning on the 15th, coffin was constructed by Jesus Silva and Vicente Otero. They used ceiling planks from an abandoned adobe house for the coffin. Garrett gave Pete Maxwell $25 to buy new clothes for Billy to be buried in. A beige suit, shirt, undergarments, and a pair of stockings. After he was placed in the coffin, he was taken to Beaver Smith's saloon until time for burial. Silva and Otero dug the grave. That afternoon, the coffin was sealed and placed in Otero's wagon. At least 150 Fort Sumner 150 Fort Sumner residents followed behind as the wagon headed to the old military cemetery. The pallbearers, Jesus Silva, Paco Anaya, Vicente Otero, Saval Gutierrez, Antonio Saavedra, and others lowered the coffin into the grave. This quote comes from Delavina Maxwell in her interview with J. Evans Haley on June 24th, 1927. Most of the native people in town went to his funeral. And Paulita told Miguel Otero for his book, The Real Billy the Kid, that practically every man, woman, and child in town followed the body to the little cemetery. Okay, now let's talk about the big thing here. Let's talk about the coroner's inquest. Okay?
Yeah.
We are at an hour. We can start
Oh my
this.
gosh.
I know, right? I know.
Time
And we just covered the death, man. I knew that was going to happen if we mentioned the whole death, but it was needed, right? We needed to do that. Okay, but we can go with just a little bit more. We'll go a little bit more and get some of this out of the way. I've been pretty quick about it, but it's all important information. Yeah. July 15th, 1881. The day Pat Garrett technically ended the life of Billy Bonney, Garrett sent the first official report from Fort Sumner to acting Governor William Rich, who was put in place after Wallace resigned. I also want to correct a popular misconception that seems to float around on the internet as well. Okay. Sheriffs do not write coroner's reports. Okay. They don't, and they don't now. It was written by Alejandro Segura, who is the Justice of the Peace. Milner Rudolph was called in from Sunnyside, which is about 7 miles from Fort Sumner. He was the president of the coroner's jury. Okay. In his official report to Governor Rich, Garrett stated, I herewith annex a copy of the verdict rendered by the jury called in by the Justice of the Peace, ex officio coroner, the original of which is in the hands of the prosecuting attorney of the 1st Judicial District of New Mexico, which was William Breeden. Okay. Now, who conducts, who are the men that are, at this inquest? Okay. So we've got Milner Rudolph, Alejandro Segura, Antonio Saavedra, Pedro Antonio Lucero, Jose Silva, Saval Gutierrez, Lorenzo Jaramillo. Okay. Those are okay. Okay. So what we're looking at, anything we show, obviously they're going to be copies. We don't have originals. That's kind of the way it works. But one of the biggest conspiracy theory that gets held onto and pushed in so many different directions with so many added details is the fact that the original inquest report was written in Spanish by Segura, which makes sense. If anyone thinks that doesn't make sense, you just got to do a little more homework on Fort Sumner and these men, and it would make more sense. Okay. Plus, that was the dominant language. Okay. So it's written in Spanish. Now, what happens? Okay. It goes missing. The original verdict of the coroner's jury, written in Spanish for July 15th, 1881, it disappeared. Okay. And for many years, nobody could find it either in San Miguel County or in the capital in Santa Fe. In the 1930s, a man named Harold Abbott, who worked for the Public Lands Office, was classifying documents in the basement of the Capitol building when he found the original report. Harold's brother George, a longtime resident of Otero County, provided a photostat of the original to author and historian William Kelleher. It is printed in his book titled Violence in Lincoln County, 1869 1881, a New Mexico item, on pages 343, 344. They did find it. They did locate it. And Garrett had the English translation, which a lot of people felt, well, we only have the translation, so it only says what Garrett wanted it to say. No, it's just a translation of the Spanish original. That's all it is. And Garrett was given the English translation so he could get the reward. That was the proof. That was the point.
Yeah.
That was the whole point. So,
and that was the standard proof of the time. That was the accepted legal, the required legal documentation. There was
absolutely
no death certificate. This was it. This was the coroner's verdict.
Yeah. And that missing document, of course, provides another alternative narrative. And people said Garrett was lying. It's all a conspiracy. The whole town is in on it. I've heard, we've heard it all. But the facts are Garrett handled the official report within all requirements of the law, and both reports were identical. You know what I mean? There wasn't anything else. We should point out that 3 of those gentlemen that we mentioned that were sat on the inquest jury, whatever, 3 of them, right, just signed an X to their name because they could not write, which was also very common. Now, everything matches from the translated version. Everything is, I've had this for quite a while. You've noticed that the names are all written in there because this is obviously a copy. So the names obviously were known. They just couldn't sign their names. But that was also used as another theory to help fuel the conspiracies that something was, off about that night, right? But in reality, documents went missing in Frontier West all the time. I mean, that is such a common thing that we deal with as historians that if anyone tells me, dude, I can know for a fact this article or this report existed, but you know what? Yeah, the courthouse burned down in 1931. I would be like, yeah, I believe it. I believe it because between 1900 and 1930, I swear half this country burned down.
Dude, the entire nation is missing the 1890 federal census because the record's burned.
Right, exactly. Yeah, everyone's come across that if you've done it. Yeah, so I get it. It's just one of those things that get frustrating.
The whole country's burned down at one point.
Yeah, and it should be mentioned too that William Kelleher's book, that photostat copy is in. I mean, that came out, I believe, in the late 50s, early 60s. So, I mean, even then, there was a copy of it, that floated around. So, also, Garrett sends his official report to William Rich, and that is going to get printed. Okay.
Yeah.
His original report, the full coroner's inquest, the English translation. So even though it did get lost for many years, the best thing about this is it was printed in the Las Cruces Sun News, page 2, July 23rd, 1881. The full inquest. Okay. Kid's death printed all over the country. all the way to Boston Globe, New York Times, Denver, California, everyone. Okay. Everyone. It is everywhere.
Well, you know what
Also,
bothers me? It's just the absurdly stupid argument that William Morrison publicized during the whole Brushy debacle, where
mhm,
he his whole point was that because the coroner's report was no longer locatable, they could no longer find it. Therefore, they could not send Morrison a certified copy of it,
yeah.
and it had to be legally certified. It had to be a certified copy so it could be presentable in court. Therefore, there was never any record that Billy the
Yeah.
Kid died, and that's just so absurd that he's applying these rigorous legal standards
Mhm.
today against a document from a century ago that has been lost and that you would expect to just be preserved and kept around. And
Sure.
I mean, that's what started that whole mess, was that, his justification for there's no proof Billy was killed was because he could not get a certified copy from the
Right. As
from
if
the
he would get
Department
one
of State.
anyway, right? That's so crazy. I get that a lot too with documents that we use PDF sometimes and be like, oh, that's not the original. Yeah, then sorry. You're BS because that's not the original. Like I'd have the original on a digital copy in the first place.
Yeah, the
Like
fact that
that's
we
just
have a
weird.
photostatic copy that we
Right.
know was provided to, acting Governor Rich, to the
Yeah.
legislature, and that they accepted it as legally sufficient should be enough. But the fact that it could not be legally certified in 1950 for William Morrison, then
Right.
it
Yeah.
proves that Billy never died. It's the most absurd thing, and I'm sure we'll get more into that,
Sure.
down the road in
Yeah.
part 2.
And then I was gonna say too, and then there's the report, the inquest, and then there's Garrett's official statement to Governor Rich, which is a little bit separate. Okay.
Yeah.
The official statement to Governor Rich, printed in the Fremont County Record, July 30th, 1881, which is out of Cannon City, Colorado. So even the entire statement to Governor Rich was printed just a couple weeks later.
Uh,
Okay.
John Wilson asked a question that I thought was interesting. Do you think the killing of the 2 deputies in Lincoln changed the general opinion about Billy? Not quite related to the coroner's report, but I think that there's some good discussion here because, in a sense, Billy was already sentenced to hang.
Yes.
So opinions had to have been changed by then already. I mean, most people were like, well, Billy's done for. He killed the 2 guards and escaped. I think yes and no. Obviously, there were some people that were going to love Billy no matter what, his friends. But I think to a great many people, they either one thought what he did was inexcusable, even though he was going to hang and that there
Mhm.
was no hope for him now, or two, even though they understood it, they knew that at least in that territory, there was no coming back for him, that he was done for. He was already sentenced to hang. They're probably not going to even try and rearrest him. They're just going to kill him.
No,
So I
yeah,
think I
yeah.
think in a sense it did change people's opinion about whether they had any future, friendship or dealings with him, because it was from that moment on, it was, I think even Billy knew from that moment on, it was basically just biding my time until I kick it.
That's another good point. We've always thought about what he was thinking about. What was he going through emotionally? I mean, still 19, 20 years old. But I would agree. I would also say in my personal feeling towards that specific incident that really catapults his fame to the escape and the killing of Bell and Ollinger is that I agree. And at that point, too, there's no way he's forming a new band of outlaws. There's no
Yeah.
way he's getting new guys to be cattle thieves with him because he's at that point, he's the most wanted guy in the territory. And what to mention is that Bell and Ollinger, not only were they sheriff deputies, they were both deputy U.S. Marshals.
What do you think about this? Rollins says the blood of Bell and Ollinger is on Lew Wallace. If he keeps his promise to Billy, then that wouldn't have happened. What do you think about that?
Well, we could go down that deep one, but after so much time and so much analysis of Billy's words, of Wallace's words, me personally, I think Wallace just kind of outsmarted Billy. That's what I think. I don't think Wallace had any intention of doing that whatsoever.
Yeah.
And Wallace so much said those words. Remember, same day that Billy escapes, the Las Vegas Gazette posted that interview with Wallace, an article, and Wallace said, "I don't know how a man such as he would expect a man such as myself to do anything for him." I'm paraphrasing,
Oh man,
right?
yeah.
But that's the day Billy escaped. That was printed, and there's been some debate over that. I think David Thomas covered it in one of his books. I did a post about it that kind of just, kind of touched on that a little bit too.
Hmm.
Was it possible that Billy read Wallace's interview? Because that newspaper article, it was titled "Kid Not to Be Pardoned."
Yeah,
That
and
was the headline.
he's like, he goes, Billy's been sending me letters
Yeah,
trying to allude to this secret thing. He goes, I'll tell you what it is. It's the pardon that he thinks I owe him, which I'm not going to do.
yeah,
And you're right. If Billy had had a chance to read it that day, which I'm not sure, but if he had, that would be quite a catalyst for the escape. Like that would
true,
explain why he waited so many days, and then that day was like,
true.
okay, Wallace is not going to honor the pardon. I'm out.
Yeah. And then you got to remember too is that back in 1879 when he starts their, communication. Billy's the one who writes Wallace first. And in that communication there are certain things, right, that Billy kind of had going for him. What did he have going for him? Well, he witnessed the killing of Houston Chapman. That was a big deal for Wallace.
Yeah.
So Billy reaches out. So anyone that's confused about that, they didn't use Billy. They used him, but Billy reaches out to Wallace and says, "I saw who killed Houston Chapman. I was there. I'll
Yeah.
be willing to testify and give you that information in exchange for a pardon for my recent crimes," right?
Yeah.
Whatever the words were. But what happened after he testifies? He testifies against Evans and Dolan and Billy Campbell. Okay.
And they escape.
They escape. He gets
Yeah.
nervous. He gets scared. The whole point though is that Billy, after that whole sham arrest with Wallace, he gets him to testify. His testimony, it's even got a date. It's in the archives. It's all there. And then Wallace doesn't do nothing. Billy's kind of left, twirling his thumbs. He's hanging out at Juan Petro's house. And I think that was when he decided in the summer, he's like, "I'm out of here. I'm leaving." And then what he do after that?
He went back
They
to
go to,
outlawing.
yeah, they go to Tularosa and they start all that stuff, man. And all of the cattle depredations, everything. He kept making it really impossible for Wallace to actually have the ability
Yeah.
to stick up for him because he kept committing crimes. And then,
Well,
of course, the killing of Jim Carlisle. After that happens, Wallace is really focused on Billy at that point.
yeah, I mean, I'm gonna have to play devil's advocate a little
Do it.
against
Do it.
the popular opinion is that I don't know what Wallace's intentions were, but
Sure.
he very well could have been at least amenable to pardoning the kid at some point. I think there were a lot of factors all working against the kid. First
Yeah.
off, and it's also funny to read the kid's letters because he talks just like any other outlaw who's like he's like, I heard there was a reward out for me. I think that can only mean a reward for me coming in and talking to you about helping out, and that
Right.
kind of like,
That's
and then
exactly what he said.
now that arrangement at Los Portales, what it is we were going to start a ranch, a bona fide ranch. It's
Right.
totally, above, that kind of talk is hilarious to read in his papers. But um, so he comes to Wallace and he's like, I know who killed Houston Chapman. Can
Yeah.
you get me a pardon? Wallace is all about it. This, if it, capturing Jesse Evans, prosecuting him, hanging him, even, executing him, that'd be a big win for Wallace. And especially, as this is Houston Chapman, an esteemed lawyer, wasn't doing anything wrong. This would
Yeah.
be a big win. So yes, come on, Billy, I'll pardon you. We'll do a good thing here. So they do it all, and then Evans escapes.
Yeah.
Well, I think Billy even sent word to Wallace of like, does our deal still hold? And
Yeah,
Wallace is like,
through Squire Wilson, that one
yeah,
letter. So please
and
tell you know who that I don't know
right,
what to do. Yeah.
yeah, and even then, it was Wallace was like, yeah, it's still going to hold. Maybe it wouldn't
Hmm.
have by then, and maybe there's some truth to the Young Guns too uh, scene where Reinerson is like, that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
So I think the ring was not to say that I don't exactly think Wallace was like terrified of the ring so much as just powerless in that instance, maybe. Um,
Yeah.
so that could be another aspect that perhaps Randerson and the other folks just weren't going to let it happen.
That's
But
very
but
true.
but I
Yeah.
think the worst thing that happened, and really what Wallace said himself in that article was that if he thinks I'm going to pardon him when he just walks away and goes right back to his depredations. Like, I
Sure.
can't do that. And that, I think, was the biggest mistake of Billy's, was that he could have left and went and joined the Coes and went down to ranching, and maybe things would have settled down. But
Yeah.
the kid went right out and just amped it up and started
Yeah.
stealing horses again and went right back
Absolutely.
at it. And I think that's the
Absolutely.
complication. So, like, I think it was a lot of factors, but I don't think it was so cut and dry as just like, well, Wallace owed Billy a pardon and he played him and then he's you know out of a pardon. Like, I think Billy had some responsibility too there.
Yeah. I agree. And I agree. And I just said the whole Reinerson thing should always be looked at carefully because in his own right, Reinerson was a powerful dude. That guy was
Yeah,
powerful. And also being, assistant district attorney of New Mexico, one thing I always love about the whole Reinerson story and his background is that Pat Garrett, known to be, big, tall, lanky,
yeah,
6'6".
yeah.
William Logan Reinerson was 7 feet tall.
That is nuts. I
Yeah, and
mean,
you've seen
nuts.
his photos, dude. He is so
Yeah,
tall. Even when he's seated, you can tell how big he is. That's
yeah.
crazy that there was somebody walking around Lincoln County like that. So,
I will say, I don't know if you've spoken to Colin recently, and Colin, I know you're listening and on the chat. I won't say too much. Uh, I'm not sure how much you want shared, but I had the chance to come across or exchange some thoughts with Roland about Reinerson, and he had some very cool observations about Reinerson and what Reinerson was reading
mhm,
at a given time and everything. And again, if Colin wants to share that, then I'd encourage it. But I'll that's all I'll say in case he wants that to be um, on the down low right now. But yeah, he
gotcha.
made me appreciate some Reinerson stuff recently.
Yeah, he's always been somebody that's been in the back of my head. It's like one of these days you need to sit down and start tracking Reinerson's timeline and see what things were available about him in his early life. Because I
Oh
would really
yeah,
be interested to know more about him in his life. So I thought because the time frame and whatnot, and I figured we might go over a little bit. I want to end it with this quote because again, to me, it's another form of an account, and we're going to go through more accounts in part two because in the 1920s, 1930s, we've got the accounts from the Fort Sumner residents and what they say. Delavina Maxwell, Jesus Silva, the guys, people like that, and it's going to actually do more damage, in my personal opinion, to the original Garrett account and Poe accounts. It's going to do more damage than it does, help support it. It
right.
becomes a problem, right? And I know that has always, for most people, assume, well, yeah, Garrett changed his story, and blah. I've heard that. No, that guy had to be interviewed about that for every day, I swear, for the rest of his life, no matter what he achieved further on as a sheriff, especially when he went to Don Anna County. You know what I mean? He
Yeah,
achieved a lot
yeah.
there. Dude, every interview he is referred to as the killer of Billy the Kid before he's referred to as the sheriff of Don Anna County.
Oh man,
It's
yeah,
it's almost every time it's in the same sentence. And so I understand, and we'll get through that. But this last one, because and you know this well, I love this quote. I think it's a great way to end part one.
One of my favorite quotes of all time. If I'm right about what you're going to share.
The last chapter of the kid's life is one I've never fully understood. For the first and only time in his career, he spoke first and shot last. He was doubtless afraid he would kill a friend of Maxwell's. Some critics claim it was cowardly of Garrett to kill the kid without giving him the ghost of a chance. They're dead wrong. Garrett was anything but a coward. It took nerve in no small package to face danger the way he did. He was the only man living who could take Billy alive. And though I would have done anything reasonable to save the kid, at the same time, I must give Pat Garrett his due. I knew him well, and I now feel no bitterness toward him for killing the kid. George Coe, Frontier Fighter.
Yeah. I
There you
think,
have it.
honestly, I think that's an appropriate take on the whole situation.
Absolutely.
I mean, you can feel what you want to feel about the kid, just like George. And although I would have done anything, you know, you can't blame Garrett, you know?
No, because Garrett didn't have a choice either. He just didn't. Sorry.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a good way to end it. So thank you everyone for joining us for part one as we deep dive into the actual legal binding documentation that says William H. Bonney, alias Billy the Kid, was killed July 14th / 15th, 1881. And part two, we will dive into the 1920s and 30s and these different accounts that begin to twist everything up. We will even talk about the first time that a letter was received at the Lincoln County Historical Society claiming that Billy the Kid was alive and well.
See you next time.
See ya.